Okay, so ready to dive deep into this gig economy thing.
Absolutely.
We're talking way more than just ordering food or catching a ride.
Right.
You've got articles here about Uber drivers actually trying to organize,
Hmm.
excerpts about Amazon's Mechanical Turk, wild stuff.
Yeah.
Even a whole case study about a town trying to retrain people for digital work. It's a lot. Let's really try to figure out what's going on behind all these apps, behind the algorithms and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. The gig economy, I mean, it definitely promises flexibility and freedom, right?
Totally.
And for some people, it delivers. You actually highlighted a section here about how millennials are like prioritizing those things
Yeah.
over traditional jobs.
Yeah, it's like the new status symbol, maybe.
Right.
It's interesting, though, because I'm seeing this reflected in all these sources.
Okay.
Like, on one hand, you've got this programmer who ditches his corporate gig to freelance through Gigster,
Right.
traveling the world,
Nice.
choosing his own projects. Sounds amazing. But then you get into, like, the nitty-gritty of these cleaning company contractors, and it's a completely different story.
Yeah, and that cleaning company orientation excerpt, that's like a perfect example of how this whole gig economy thing can get really blurry.
Totally.
They want employees,
Yeah.
but they don't want to actually call them employers.
They want it both ways.
Exactly.
They want the reliability, the consistency.
Well, control.
They want yeah, but without the
Responsibilities.
the legal stuff.
The legal stuff, exactly.
Yeah.
The classifications, the responsibilities, all of that.
It's like having your cake and eating it too.
Right.
But what about the risk, though? There's no paid time off.
Yeah.
There's no sick leave.
Right.
There's no health insurance. Like, if something happens,
Exactly.
like that Mechanical Turk worker who hurt her wrist,
Yeah.
you're on your own.
That story is like the perfect example
No.
of what can go wrong. Like this whole be your own boss thing. Freedom has a price. Yeah. And not everybody can afford it.
It's true.
It's like walking a tightrope without a net.
100% exhilarating for some, terrifying for others.
Yeah. And speaking of uneven terrain, you flagged this town's effort to get people trained in digital work.
Yeah, Sama School, I think it was called.
Right. Like on the surface, it sounds like a great idea.
Totally, yeah.
Give people skills for this new world.
Exactly.
But then you read that book excerpt and you realize just having access to the platform, it's not enough.
Right. It's not a magic bullet.
It's way more complicated.
Well, it's like giving everyone a map to a gold rush, but some people are starting 1,000 miles behind.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It really highlights how this whole level playing field idea, it's often just a myth.
Right? Because anyone can technically sign up to drive for Uber or do those little tasks on Mechanical Turk, but it's not actually fair.
Exactly. And in a lot of cases, it just makes existing inequalities even worse.
And we see that playing out in these articles all the time, like the Facebook content moderators, essential work, but without the benefits or job security of actual employees.
And it's a trend we've been seeing for a while, right? Companies wanting to cut costs, avoid certain obligations, so they shift to more contingent labor temps, freelancers, independent contractors, all that.
Right. And the gig economy just like turbocharges that whole thing.
Exactly. And often with even less accountability.
And way less bargaining power for the workers.
Exactly.
That article about the port truck drivers,
Mm-hmm.
that was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
They were classified as independent contractors, but they actually ended up owing the company money.
Wow.
It makes no sense.
It really highlights the power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
Like if a company controls everything as your access to work, how much you get paid if they can just deactivate you from the platform.
Right. You're not really independent.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what does employment even mean anymore?
It's like the Wild West out there.
Right.
Technology is moving so fast, but the rules are struggling to keep up.
And a big part of that is figuring out this whole worker classification thing.
Yeah, because employee versus contractor, does that even make sense anymore?
Exactly. Especially with the gig economy, it's like those categories are bursting at the seams.
And so many people are falling through the cracks.
Exactly. And it's not just Uber drivers or TaskRabbits.
Right, it's everywhere.
We're talking musicians, journalists, even academics.
It's like this weird in-between space.
Right. And it raises all these questions about who deserves protections and how do we make sure things are fair when the world of work is changing so fast.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface here, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not all bad news, though, right?
Absolutely not.
There are people out there trying to make things better, to make the gig economy more fair.
Right. There's some really interesting ideas out there. You highlighted this whole concept of portable benefits.
Yeah, portable benefits. What does that even mean? Like, break that down.
Okay, so basically the idea is to detach benefits from a specific employer
Okay.
and attach them to the worker.
Interesting. So instead of relying on one company for health insurance or paid time off, you would build your own safety net.
Exactly. Like imagine a freelancer who has worked a bunch of different gigs. They would have this like backpack of benefits that they carry with them from job to job.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
Right.
It could be huge for so many people if it works.
Yeah, if it works. I mean, there are a lot of logistics to figure out.
Yeah, how do you even make that happen?
Right. Who pays for it?
Right.
Who manages it? How do you make sure it's affordable for everyone? There are pilot programs, and some people are trying to make it happen.
So it's early stages, but it's hopeful.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need to get creative if we're going to find solutions that actually fit this new world of work.
100%.
Because the old ways aren't going to cut it.
And it's not just about benefits either. Some people are suggesting we need a whole new worker classification.
Okay. Now that's interesting, like a third option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because right now it's either employee or independent contractor. And like we were saying, those categories don't always fit.
Right.
So they're saying we need something new, maybe an independent worker.
So somewhere in between.
Exactly. A new legal framework that recognizes how unique gig work can be.
I see.
So you have more rights and protections than a traditional contractor.
Okay.
But companies aren't on the hook for all the costs and liabilities of a full-time employee.
Sounds tricky, like walking a tightrope.
It is, and there's a lot of debate about it.
Yeah.
Some people worry it's just a way for companies to exploit workers.
Yeah, to get all the benefits without the responsibility.
Exactly. While others say it could create this two-tiered system where these independent workers have less than traditional employees.
It's complicated.
It's super complex, no easy answers.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
The old categories don't work, but inventing new ones comes with a whole new set of problems.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be talking about this.
100%.
The gig economy is making us rethink everything about work.
Yeah.
What does it even mean to be an employee in this day and age? Who deserves protections?
Big questions.
Huge questions. How do we make sure things are fair? How do we balance flexibility with fairness when the landscape is changing so quickly?
And while we're trying to figure all of that out,
Yeah.
there are real people doing this work right now.
Right.
And we can't forget about them.
Exactly.
Just talked about that programmer who's doing great as a freelancer, but what about the people who are struggling?
Right.
Like the woman in Toronto who hurt her wrist doing those online tasks. What happens to them?
Yeah, her story is important.
Yeah.
Because it reminds us that the gig economy isn't one size fits all.
It's not a magical solution.
Right. For some people, it's amazing. It's opportunity. It's freedom.
For others, not so much.
Yeah. For others, it just makes things harder and it creates new problems.
It's like we don't always think about the human cost of convenience.
100%. And it goes back to that town trying to get people trained for digital work.
Right. Good intentions.
Yeah. Even with the best intentions, there are these systemic issues that can prevent those initiatives from actually leveling the playing field.
Because it's not enough to just give people access to technology if they're starting at a disadvantage.
Exactly.
Due to factors that they can't control.
This is where the conversation about economic justice becomes really important.
Yeah. How do we make sure that everyone benefits from innovation, not just a select few?
Exactly.
It does feel like there's this tension between the dream of the gig economy.
Right.
You know, be your own boss, work when you want, where you want, and then the reality, which isn't always that pretty.
It's true. And that tension is what makes this whole thing so interesting to talk about.
Yeah, it is.
It's not about saying the gig economy is all good or all bad. It's about understanding it and then figuring out how to make it work better for everyone.
So how do we do that? How do we navigate all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It really is.
And I think part of it is looking beyond the apps, beyond the algorithms, beyond the technology itself, and remembering the human element.
The human cost.
Yeah, because every click, every swipe, every gig,
it has an impact.
It has an impact on a real person's life.
It's true. We can't forget about the human side of all that.
And it's not just those individual stories either. This is changing how we think about work as a whole.
Totally. It's like a fundamental shift.
Exactly, and it's everywhere, you know?
It really is healthcare, education, journalism, transportation. It's kind of wild, actually.
It's like the lines are blurring everywhere you look.
Exactly. And in this weird in-between phase, you know, like the old rules don't apply anymore, but we haven't figured out the new ones yet.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange time.
It's exciting and scary all at once, honestly.
It really is.
But you've pointed to some potential solutions in all of this.
Yeah, well, you highlighted this idea of platform cooperatives.
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting one. It almost sounds too good to be true. Like, instead of being at the mercy of some big corporation or some algorithm, what if workers actually owned and controlled the platforms themselves?
Exactly. Imagine a ride-sharing app that's owned and run by the drivers,
Wow.
or a freelance platform that's governed by the workers.
It's a cool idea, but is it actually realistic?
Well, there are definitely challenges, right?
Yeah, like how would they compete?
Exactly. They'd be up against these giant companies with tons of money and power.
It seems like an uphill battle for sure.
It would be tough, but then again, so much of what we're seeing now would seemed impossible a few years ago.
That's true. The world of work is changing so fast.
Exactly. And I think the gig economy, for all its flaws, is forcing us to rethink some really fundamental things.
Like, what does work even look like in the 21st century?
Exactly. And how do we make sure it's fair? How do we balance all this new freedom and flexibility with basic rights and protections?
Big questions.
Big questions. And hopefully, by asking them, by grappling with all these complexities, we can actually create something better.
Something more equitable, more sustainable.
Absolutely. A future of work that actually works for everyone.
So how do we get there? What do we need to do?
Well, I think awareness is key.
Yeah.
We need to understand what's really going on,
Well,
what the potential pitfalls are, but also the potential opportunities.
because knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. And we need to be having these conversations, not just among ourselves, but with policymakers, with tech companies, with everyone.
Because this affects all of us.
It really does. It's about shaping the future of work, but it's also about shaping the kind of society we want to live in.
That's a really good point.
So yeah, I think it starts with awareness, with education, with having these sometimes difficult conversations.
And then what? What can people actually do? Like if someone's listening to this and like, this is all really interesting, but what can I do?
That's a great question, and I think there are a lot of things people can do, even small things that can make a difference.
It really is a lot to think about, even just wrapping my head around everything we've talked about today. The flexibility, the risks, the laws, those alternative models. It's a lot.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
And it feels like we're at this crucial point, you know?
I agree. The gig economy isn't some small thing anymore. It's
Right.
like it's everywhere you look.
Totally.
And it's changing everything.
It's true. And like you said, it can be used for good or bad.
Exactly.
It could empower people, make things fairer.
Or it could make the problems we already have even worse.
Exactly. And it feels like it all comes down to the choices we make.
100%. The choices we make now will determine what happens next.
It's kind of a lot of pressure, actually.
It is. It's on all of us, consumers, workers, policymakers, tech companies, everyone to figure this out.
So where do we even begin? What should we be focusing on?
Well, like we've been talking about, awareness is key.
Yeah.
We need to understand how this all works, the good and the bad.
Because if we don't understand it, we can't fix it.
Exactly. And we need to be talking about it, having these conversations, making sure our voices are heard.
Okay, so awareness, conversations, what else? What can people actually do?
Think about your own choices,
Like what?
Like, next time you open up an app to order food or book a ride,
Yeah.
take a second to think about the person on the other end of that transaction.
Right, there's a human being doing that work.
Exactly. A human being with their own hopes and struggles and dreams.
It's easy to forget that sometimes.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in the convenience of it all.
Totally.
But remembering the human element, that's crucial.
So think before you swipe, basically.
Think before you swipe, ask questions, demand better, because a more equitable and sustainable future of work depends on it.
That's a powerful message. And on that note, I think we're going to have to leave it there for today.
Sounds good.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. Thanks for taking the time to break it all down with us.
My pleasure. Always happy to be here.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the gig economy.
It's a complex issue, but hopefully, by understanding it better, we can all help create a future of work that works for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time.